Hello, and welcome to the value of everything. Right, we are going to explore a new politician on the scene. Oh my god, how riveting is this going to be? There has been some interesting developments in the UK, and it has definitely grabbed my attention. And considering that I am a citizen of the UK, and I have, well, let's say, my curiosity for politics has been quite ingrained in the UK, probably going back much, well, very extended period, probably going on for, let's say, 15 years. So, yeah, the British political system is fairly interesting. It is obviously the one which a lot of countries do try to replicate, considering that they're all part of the colonial system of the British Empire. But it does have some very good merits in it, in terms of the rule of law, property rights, all of those fantastic things which enable free market trade and all those beautiful things. You've got Adam Smith, you've got all the great philosophers of the 18th century, a little bit of the 19th century, which flooded down all of this information and passed it into Parliament. Freedom of speech, majority of this stuff does get taken down. And then obviously we've got a lot more history in terms of, well, we've got a system in terms of we had a monarchy system for quite some time until that got overthrown, and we got the Cromwell came in and became a prime minister. And then we had like a little system where we still got the Queen around, but even though she is the head of the military, she doesn't really have any sort of power or any sort of say. She's just a status sort of symbol of the country. But it's a fairly interesting system to look at. It's how everything originated from and everything that's been formed. Even the American system is, I mean, I know it's a Republican system, but it's, in general, there's a lot of similarities in all of these systems. And obviously one of the very important ones of the parties which do need to be explored is the labour union movement. So obviously we never really mentioned too much about the union movement. Sometimes that does get a little bit of bad press in the past, but we do think about labour and we think, oh yeah, the labour force, the working, hard-working people of this this earth that are just trying to make do, get on by, and they're probably being slightly molested, exploited by these big tyrannical monopoly guys with monocles and moustaches, trying to pay them pittance for their jobs. So there's these guys in the world, and there needs to be this labour political union movement, which represents these guys because they don't really get a voice. It always seems to be, as we have pretty much in place at the moment, a corporatocracy where the powers are really in the, I guess, okay, you could say that the power of the vote is in the hands of the people. Still, there is questions because I don't know really why the system is all based upon paper when you can really just play around with how the vote is counted. But neither here nor there. When it comes to the votes, you've got obviously two sides of the political sides. So you've got usually your Labour Party and your Conservative Party. but usually they are funded, and they're funded by corporations or very wealthy people. And usually, whenever you make a transaction, you don't start to put money into politicians' pockets for no reason at all. I don't think if you don't really find that you just walk around finding fairly charismatic rich people that you want to put your money into the pockets of, then obviously I don't think these corporations will do that either as well, considering that they need to be very frugal with their money. So there is some kind of kickback or favour in return for political funding, and maybe it is for just asking a question at question time, or maybe it is something a little bit more in legislation, I can't even say the word, whereby you can put forward a law or just lightly change things which make it a little bit more harder for other people to enter into the market and compete against your business. Therefore, it requires certain amounts of training and yada yada for you to become a hairdresser or something like that. Who knows? But there is a certain level of a corporatocracy which is in power. Now, so that's obviously one area, one end of the scale. And obviously that's that is a fair use of bribery and manipulation of the people at the top, and obviously the politicians are using the force of the law to abide by certain rulings to complement these very wealthy corporate type people. So you can obviously see that there is a throwback to this, and the throwback to this is obviously the labour union movement, which uses the same manipulative method, even though it has probably got some very good standings. If the labour movement was more so about just highlighting and shedding the light on the corporations, but still was fairly free market, had an idea of people's liberty, and free market, was promoting the free market. I guess you can say you've got things like the Liberal Democrats, but it doesn't necessarily work out too well like that either, because a lot of the political parties in the UK just take this moderate tone. They never go one side or the other. But yeah, so from the one side of the corporation, you have got the representation of the working class, but it has got a little bit worse than that. It's not really the working class as much anymore. It's more so the welfare class, the immigrant class, and so when I say the new, fresh immigration that is coming into, say, the UK or most other Western countries, this sort of does apply to most other countries. Also, the elderly class, so anybody that's really creaming off the state, using the state's force to redistribute the wealth back to them, they are really prone to use the labour union movement, as was the corporatocracy, is to use the maybe like the conservative side of government to pass certain laws to ensure that they have more of a monopoly on the businesses that they run. Now you've got one side of the scale, both are using force and basically applying their own methodologies to get what they want. I did make a comment. I was thinking to myself a little bit earlier. I was thinking, if there's one force to the other, what is the lesser evil? And I can't really go too far in saying that one is worse than the other. I can say that for a certain extent that, like, the end situation of both sides are probably quite annoying, or not quite annoying, but quite bleak, really. I think in terms of the labour union movement, you're really just going to eat your own tail after a while, because as soon as you start taxing the wealth generators, then more so that they will disperse, and then you have this sort of balancing act until there is no more wealth generation, and you know that you're in this death spiral of no return, and things are going to get gradually worse and worse, and you're going to tax higher and higher. And then on the other side, you have got the corporatocracy, which will put the motives of the corporation, the corporation's greed, the consumerism lifestyle way ahead of every other thought. So it will sort of really change the perspective of people's motives, being more attuned to just generating wealth, and more so than anything else. I guess that you may still have wealth generators alive and well in the country and staying in the country, so it may be slightly, you might be in a situation where there is money going around, and there is ability to increase wealth, and there is some kind of entrepreneurialism and inventiveness which is going on. However, when a corporation is bigger than a person, you do obviously have issues. You may have some certain kind of things where people are putting obviously the profit motive in front of everything else. So you might have environmental disasters, you may have problems with genetically modifying foods. There's all different things which may put the money incentive way ahead of everything else. And where could it lead? Who knows? But it may even get to a point of where we find ourselves in a complete money expansion world, where we just continuously expand our money system into this endless upreach until all assets are just getting overvalued, and then there's a deflation, and then we have to increase the money supply even further, like the QE systems, until we find ourselves into a hyperinflation spiral. So you do have I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not really funny, but it is just there's two sides of the scale, and really both of them can blow up or implode the nation. And really, obviously, the key ones, the ones that have been really successful, is the ones that have found some kind of moderate ground where they can keep civil liberty going, they can keep the liberty of the people going, and while keeping the free market trade going. So where you apply as much liberty to the people as well, you can install a system of law and order without being too manipulative on the people, and you have a state which is fairly shrunken, so it's highly efficient in not taxing too much from the people, and therefore the people can produce and trade and create and invent new ideas which increase the production and capital of the people. So real simple, isn't it? So we find ourselves in this scenario where it goes one step too far on the pendulum swing to one side to the other. So over the years for the UK, there has been a fairly, I would say, moderate, slightly leaning towards the corporation side of things, whereby not only the conservative movement, which is always sort of grounded itself more so in the centre circle of politics, or the centre right, where when I mentioned the right side, it's more so where we say right wing, that's more of a business orientated, slightly more nationalism, less taxes, more entrepreneurships, things like that, and less welfare states. Whereas the Labour movement as well, since Tony Blair came into power, has been very moderate and in the middle to even middle right, pretty much taking the same position as the Conservatives, So fundamentally, there hasn't been really too much of a difference between the two of the parties for a number of years. And I would say to a certain extent, Tony Blair had been fairly charismatic in the way that he had led the country, and he did seem to be very popular with the vote. So it was basically the rebranding of the Labour Party from being a trade union party into more of a liberal, slightly right-wing country. Now, there has been in the UK a number of things of increasing the state in terms of the NHS, which is their healthcare system, and increasing the school systems. All of those public services have been increased at the same time, and there has been sort of a little bit more of a funneling of funding, or an emergence of financial sector growth in the vacuum of this country. And I guess there's obviously been a lot of more liberalisation in laws and business growth, and the terms of banking requirements, which has really pushed forward the banking sector as well. So you can see that obviously over the years we did have labour union movements. Tony Blair had switched that around, and then you had obviously David Cameron coming into power. And pretty much, I guess the way the style is fairly Tony Blairish like as in itself. I guess he's going to be a tiny bit more right wing. He has taken control of the country, and he obviously has found himself at the helm when the major banking crisis had occurred, and he has obviously been trying to put forward a lot of savings and potentially even increasing taxes, trying to balance the books and trying to keep down the deficit spending while trying to keep business growth at the same time, which is, I would say, probably a very hard thing to do in itself. And at the same time, he has trying to been increasing the money supplies so he can pay off the debts or minimize the debts in the future. So it's one of these little balancing acts that David Cameron's been doing. So there hasn't been too much of a difference between the Labour union movement and the Conservative Party. And in the Labour Party, you had seemed to be getting a lot of Blairites, which were pretty much people that were in that sort of very moderate right position, going to the Labour Party and setting a career for themselves within the Labour Party. Now it's fairly interesting because now the Labour Party has really swung full pendulum back to its original self into being a Labour union representative movement. Now that's the kind of thing that it was between after the war and to the 70s, where the UK had Labour parties in place and they increased the welfare state, and the UK really didn't do an awful lot between that period of time. It didn't really come up with any fantastic inventions. The manufacturing industries, the automobile industries, and the motorcycle industries, which we were at the forefront of, all collapsed and decayed because of the power of the workers getting their rights, getting higher wages, which really weren't working with the margins of the business until they all folded, and it was just this complete crashing down back to a time until literally there wasn't really much to go on, and there was a lot of, let's say, problems with the way that the country was run. The union movements had got too much power, and they were dictating too much to the power of the state. And then, obviously, after that time, when the late 70s to the early and throughout the 80s and 90s, the Conservatives came into power, particularly with Margaret Thatcher, which probably was one of the best the leaders in terms of free market libertarianism, where she installed. I guess she was a little bit nationalistic and a little bit power hungry in that sense, but she did fight against the union movements, which were engulfing the country and really were just killing killing the UK government into a corner where there was literally no free market trade and capitalism going on until it was getting really just it was going to turn into one of those Eastern Bloc countries. So Margaret Thatcher came into power. She used the force of the state to stop the force of the Union Party getting their power and getting their way, and really reaugmented the country to be more of a service sector country, where you do have a gigantic service stroke banking insurance industry, particularly more so in London, where you have the majority of the wealth being created and a little bit less, or a lot more neglected in sort of the northern countries. The northern parts of the UK and Scotland, Wales, you've got the miners there, and Northern Ireland at the same time. So that, obviously, I'm sorry, I've just jumped across from different times and given us a little bit of a picture, but I guess that sort of describes the scene and the land of the UK. Now, we come to an interesting stage whereby just recently we had Ed Miliband and David Cameron fight a general election. And Ed Miliband, unfortunately, let's say, I don't think he has got that outgoing charisma. He doesn't have that look and appeal. Probably hasn't got that sort of look of a real dominant leader. And I guess appearances can be quite important as well. And it didn't really work out for Ed Miliband. There was mentioned that some of his ideas and his plans that he put forward, his manifesto, was quite good, but it really went to the polls, and David Cameron really dominated. So we now have, we had a problem within the Labour Party. There was a lot of Blairites which were trying to maintain power, and probably there was a little bit of a distinctive, there was no distinctive difference between the Conservatives and the Labour Party. Now, considering that the UK has been going under a number of austerity measures that have been encroaching on the welfare class, the working class, maybe even the elderly and the immigrants which are entered into this country, there has been a certain movement in the voting bloc to be a little bit anti what's the word? Austerity? I can't say the word. Anyway, but it's just basically making cuts and being austere to the people. And it's basically a reduction of the state giving handouts, and obviously, but the money's not going back into lower taxation. It's probably maintaining the same level of taxation, and trying to keep the deficit, which the deficit is only the interest payments on the debt. But just trying to cover the interest, basically measuring your interest on your credit card, just trying to pay off that alone, and then hopefully making a little bit of a dent into the debt itself. So these austerity measures, I can say the word now, is really a major nuisance for people that, I guess, the people that have completed work and really just are feeding from the state. And it is increasing the voting bloc of the Labour movement in one side of their what shall we say, in one side of their political ideology. So, whereas the Labour Party had branded themselves as this new sort of middle ground, sort of conservatives, but a little bit more thinking about the people, branding type, and I guess Ed Miliband and Gordon Brown were still in that same kind of mindset. It has swung to their old ways, where it's all about power to the people, socialism to a certain extent, and trade union power. So a lot of this connection does connect the dots to communism as well, where basically power of the state is working to spread the wealth, redistributing the wealth of the rich and spreading it evenly amongst its people. Now, in theory, this is a fantastic idea, but the problem begins not only with just the ideology and obviously giving people a certain amount of power, which is even incredibly strange from the onset, but it's the problem with the way that we breed. It's sex, unfortunately. It sort of boils down to in itself. And the problem is that if we were ants or bees, and we were all workers that were functioning in our own specialization, and there was one type which could breed, and there was one type that could be the military, and there was one type that could be the workers, then we could have some kind of social order which would work and redistribute wealth in that scheme. However, we have sex with one particular mate. I guess you could have a polygamy relationship, but we do have monogamous relationships, and we do breed in this mythology. So therefore, we have particular specializations in terms of the way that we have been brought up, and the way that we aspire to be certain people. So, therefore, if I am born into this world, I have particular things that I'm quite good at, just from my curiosity and from the way that I've learned things. And it doesn't really make too much of a sense for me to be in the morning time a doctor, in the afternoon a farmer, and in the evening time to be a teacher. It's all the way that we can achieve a certain level of production and be very specialized is the way that we are really benefiting in our social order to create inventions. Now, the actual way that we actually improve society is by us automating and creating things or labor-saving devices which improve the living standards of everybody. So, if I'm living in a tribe with you and you have worked out a way to create shelter, and then we use your method of creating shelter and we apply it to everybody else, we have, by your idea, your invention, we have improved the living standards of our tribe. And that continuation of, okay, you've worked out a new tool for hunting, so you can hunt more prey. That is a new tool. We can work out agriculture together, and we have learned a new tool which has freed us from... so with finding shelter, we're not having to run around finding caves anymore. So we can stay and we can move, and we've got more options for ourselves. From having a better hunting tool means that we can hunt from further around. We can we don't have to move and expire too much energy to do these things. So every time there's a certain level of efficiency which is being created by this inventiveness. And the fostering of inventiveness and entrepreneurialism is only created by a certain amount of libertarianism and people having the ability to specialize and learn in their own self-degree so that they can create a certain level of efficiency for other people, create value for other people, which in turn feeds back down in a feedback loop which improves the living standards of all. Now, obviously, that's like the libertarian free market movement, but the problem is obviously there is the corporatocracy, which does take the the profits and the greed motives beyond everything else, and you do have obviously some issues with that at the same time. So maybe there was some kind of point I was getting to at that stage, but I think I've lost my trail of thought. Never mind. We go back to the Labour movement, which has gone. It's tried to change its colours once again and gone back to its roots of being a representative of the people. Power to the people. Now, we have Ed Miliband, who has, I guess he's resigned from his position as leader of the Labour Party, and now we have somebody that was sort of really out of the blue, and he's really swept away the landscape, because you had a lot of Blairites trying to come forward and really just take the position and just be a little bit more of the same. But there was some requests that Jeremy got put into the leadership debate, and he really did appeal to the union movement, or the working class people, with his anti-austerity what shall we say, lectures or debates that he put forward against the other leaders, who just didn't seem to really represent the people anymore. They just seem to be old Blairites, moderate conservative-ish people. So this Jeremy Corbyn has been put forward, and he absolutely smashed the Labour Party, all the other like opposition leader runners against him. And he went away with an incredible margin, more so than the charismatic Tony Blair. And he had, definitely appealed to the Labour Party in his anti-austerity measures and his requirements to say that there should be no more austerity. Enough is enough. We can have a better country without having to do this. Don't let the fat cat's greediness people get their way. So, interesting. I mean, this doesn't really have too much to do, but there's this little talk that, from a starting perspective, they say that he looks a little bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is probably going to be a little bit better than Ed Miliband. I think everyone has got that sort of cult figure idea of this Obi-Wan Kenobi type, trying to be this force against the empire of the Conservative Party, the Darth Vader, David Cameron. So that does put him in a fairly good appearance measure, but obviously appearances can be fairly deceiving. So I just want to go over a few of the ideas and things that are being put forward by Jeremy Corbyn. And obviously he's been probably the most socialist type leaders probably since Michael Foot, who was the leader of the Labour Party around the early 80s. So you have Jeremy mentioning that there should be a new national investment bank to encourage growth and reduce the deficit. So this is a nationalised bank, and this really doesn't, I don't quite understand exactly what the plan is here, but if it does, in essence, get interest rates from the Bank of England at a reduced margin, that obviously doesn't help out with competition. And therefore, you do have issue, and obviously that can be some kind of anti-corporation sort of idea, but that does obviously make it very tough for, let's say, free market banks, in quotes, against this government bank, which can provide lending at certain levels, at reduced levels, and can get very much access to lower interest rates. Also, we have the problem here is that government banks or government loans are always incredibly more riskier than private loans. Now, the reason of that is obviously the person that takes the hit if there is any problems is the taxpayer. So you haven't really got too much responsibility when these loans are lent out to the poor or people from like lower class backgrounds who haven't got the ability to pay off these loans. So therefore, you do have an incredible amount of risk to the taxpayer, where you have non-private banks, government banks giving out loans to citizens, which really shouldn't be being awarded these loans. Really, you should be given a loan which is something that demonstrates that you are going to be more efficient in the future. So you need to retool your factory to scale up and to produce more so that you can have further profits in the future, which will pay off the loan that you are requesting at the moment. So yeah, you can get these fairly risky loans which can be started to be taken out by this National Investment Bank to encourage growth, quotes, which is always statistically far worse than what you have in terms of private banks making private loans. Because I guess there has been a lot of free credit which has been sloshing around the system in essence. But I guess when it comes to any risk, if things start to kick back, I know that banks do request bailouts and stuff at times. But in theory, when a problem does occur, the bank should be taking the hit of the risk of taking out too many loans which were too risky. Okay, so obviously, it's sort of two sides of the coin. It's one whereas the taxpayer takes the hit from the corporation bank, which has requested that the banks are too big to fail. So you could sort of see that. And then the other way is that you've got this national bank instead, and they just take all the risk instead. But then obviously, still, regardless of what side of the coin you're on, taxpayer still takes a big hit of the risk. I guess the corporate banks in the past obviously had funded the political parties quite considerably, so a lot of the measures that got put in place, and probably because of how contagion the problems were, if the banking system did collapse, there will be major repricing and recalibrations in the market. The housing market would crash in seconds. There'll be a massive change in the market system straight away if you did have a gigantic banking failure. So there was this government movement to bail in the banks during the credit crisis or the global financial crisis. So yeah, you can sort of see that this National Investment Bank to encourage growth and reduce the deficit is sort of like this kind of nice looking idea, but it does put the taxpayers on the line for further problems. If anything, you really just want to free up the market of the banking sector and state to the banking sector that you have the government will not enforce any more regulation, but you are on your own. If you give out any risky loans to anybody else, you will get no more bailouts. And if you fold, you fold, and if it's contagion, it is contagion. That is the free market principle. If there is failure, then obviously the more the better loaned banks, the ones that are very prudent over time, will survive, and the ones that are very risky will fail. And that is the measure of the free market. That really should have been applied, but obviously we've got this idea of a national bank now. The next one would be public ownership of, from Jeremy, public ownership of the railways and the energy sector. Wow. So, I guess it can seem to be a little bit funny that you have where you have these corporations placing bids from the government to get sort of monopolies on certain railway lines where they can charge anything to the customers. It is still a corporation, though, and they do have to be efficient with their money. Where you have a central power state which is in control of a business which is trying to run a profit, there isn't as much of a profit motive in place there. So the CEOs or the managers of that energy sector or the railway line isn't really too profit motive, so they aren't really going to be pushing forward incredible amounts of cost savings, or trying to be as competitive against any other competitors in the market. And if you do not have any competition in the market, you obviously really destroy inventiveness or any sort of new ideas which could flourish in the market. So imagine if the energy sector has this massive overhaul where we return to green energy, but we're still government controlled, and governments are so slow at really putting forward new ideas that you would have pretty much a lot of the old defunct power plants still being in power. So you could see yourself in a situation where this public ownership, inefficient market is really starting to even charge more so than what happened in the past. And where you have business owners, which, people that are running these systems, which the profit motive is no longer there anymore. There isn't really the efficiency drivers. There isn't any real big need to make big cost savings. And more so you've got in the union movements, which want higher wages and more pay for the work that they do. You just provide a service to the people, which is probably less efficient, is going to have less innovation, and over time is going to become more and more expensive. And people seem to forget what national railway lines were like. I know that in the UK sometimes it can be pretty tough. But there has, I would say that the times of the trains and the services are vastly improved when we have had private ownership. I know it's corporation ownership, but it's been private ownership in comparison to national ownership, where there was probably quite a lot of delays and union movements and things like that. So if you want to foster innovation and ideas and competition, you really want to privatize markets as much as you can. This sector can be a profitable thing for the government, where they can take taxes from the workers and they can take taxes from the companies. But now instead, they could have a business which makes no profit whatsoever. And it could end up just being a net cost for the government. So, and remember that the government doesn't really it doesn't really create any wealth. It doesn't really push forward anything that's good for the citizens in the long run. It really just tries to appease the people, and it is people focused rather than trying to create an efficient, innovative market. So you can see obviously problems occurring further down the line, but it's going to probably, if you could see that there would be any sort of benefit, you could see that the workers of these companies could probably become very rich in the period in which these businesses were taken over by the government. They could probably provide better working hours. They could probably provide better pay. They could provide better holidays for the workers of these railways or energy sectors. However, it would not be good. It would not be a better service for the customer, which the customer is the major driver of everything. And it wouldn't even be good for the owner, which would be the government after a while. Okay, so the next one is to replace Trident with jobs that retain the skills of the workers. Now, Trident is the nuclear missile submarines which defend the realm of the British government. So there is a fairly positive thing in this world called it's kind of dangerous, but at the same time it's kind of good, which is mutually assured destruction. If you get a country like Russia that decides, oh, we'll have the UK for ourselves now, they could basically invade the UK. Probably would have had a big enough army to do that. And I guess you would have obviously collaborations of forces. You probably have the Americans going, oh, no way that's going to happen. But if you did have this recession in armaments, and there is dangerous countries in this world that could potentially use the use of force to increase the land measures and things like that, and if there was no nuclear arsenal from a country, really, you do have the green light to just invade a country as long as you've got the military capability of land weaponry to do that. And obviously, you shouldn't really have a country that's got really good allies in terms of the Americans. Now, obviously, you've got something called the United Nations, which means that you cannot really invade another country without there being a real threat to your own. But it's kind of interesting, if you do decrease the armaments, it really needs to be from both sides of the scale. You need to be sort of just try to decommission arms from both sides of the fence rather than just decommissioning your ones. I know that there is United Nations, but it is a collaboration of force, and they can put forward different things in terms of their ideas. There is a good incentive to have a certain degree of national defence to ensure that your borders are protected from any oppressive forces. Maybe you might have a big communism sort of force that's trying to take over your land. Who knows? We may not be in the state of this big super empire of America anymore. They may need to reduce all their arms, and you can't really depend on the Americans forevermore. So there is still a dependency of you having your own arms and protecting oneself. It goes back to the original principle, but if you could apply it to the state of self-protection, self-protection is very necessary, particularly if you're in this day and age and world. If you do also have the problems of the economy that we're having right now, and you have extremism, which is obviously happening to the Labour Party. When extremism happens, then you obviously have issues of people coming to power which want to take over land, and you've got like some characters like Hitler coming out of nowhere and Stalin. So you do have particular issues of extremism, and really you do want to keep hold of your major weapons just in case these things do get out of hand, and you have a I guess a preventative measure against anybody really trying to take liberties against you. Now, you could obviously say, okay, the UK is obviously a big country. There's no way that somebody's going to do a full-scale land invasion, but the UK has got plenty of islands, and it would be pretty tough for the UK to defend invasion of certain islands. The Nazis did invade certain islands of the UK beforehand in the Second World War, so it definitely can happen again. And you never understand how oppressive countries and nations can be in these times. So, look, it's an expensive thing to have these nuclear arsenals and these nuclear weapons. But unless there was a decent, fair, independent program which was reducing the nuclear arsenal of the world, and it was starting all around and all over the place to reduce the cost of arms, because it is obviously you're producing something that only destroys, but also it does give a level of protection, and it does give us the ability to flourish and live peacefully and trade and be entrepreneurs at the same time. So even though you could say that there is an immense amount of cost initially, potentially it gives us in the long run a certain sense of stability which wouldn't really exist if we never had it at all. Let me move on from the Trident. So, house building program and rent controls. Now, I heard that there was something in terms of if you was renting off your landlord, that you could purchase back that property from them. I'm not sure how that would work out. I would really be interested to find out and read a little bit more about that one. But if you are just building houses to solve the problem of not enough decent affordable housing in the world, you are doing the old classic chestnut of just trying to patch up certain problems without looking at the entire holistic problem of what the housing market is. If you wish, you can listen to the Housing Bubble podcast, which I episode, which I gave out. But basically, to put it into a nutshell, it really isn't sort of just this problem of supply and demand. There is a number of factors which is affecting the problem of housing supply. Obviously, houses are priced at a ridiculously high rate. And part of that problem is to do with the money supply system, which is going in, which is basically providing more and more credit or debt into the system so that people can obtain more and more debt to outbid each other and increase the price of houses. So it really just turns into this investor speculative bubble rather than actually something that somebody really wants to buy and use it for its purpose. So if you start going off and build a number of houses in the background while you've got this problem of credit expansion at the same time, at some point, this obviously is happening in China, at some point this market is going to combust and you are going to have a load of empty houses left on the market. And nobody really willing to purchase them at even probably the cost price of what you made them for. So basically, you have misallocated resources, and obviously having large states which have these high, middle, central powered ideas of creating like business sectors out of nowhere, steals money from the public out of taxation and puts it and funnels it into other markets, which really the public may not need even in the now or even in the future. So all that money has been stolen, squandered, and put into something else which was not required in the first place, was not a requirement of the people. Really, the money should be in the hands of the people so that they can make choices and they can build their own properties. So really the idea is to tax your people as lowly as possible, get the free market, the innovation, the ideas going as much as possible so people can have plenty of money in their hands, and then they can start building houses on their own private terms, and they can obviously work out what their needs are the best. So maybe they don't really require these big 3-bedroom houses. Maybe they're quite happy with these single units. Who knows exactly what their requirements are? But if you start dictating that every person should have a nice big 3-bedroom house with a plot of land, you are going to get a situation where people think, oh, I didn't really want all of this. I just need a little place and stuff like that. And they'll end up selling down their properties and they'll try and move into smaller things, and that can have a disastrous effect on the property market. So yeah, this is where central planning and the state can really create these distortions, these bubbles, these misallocations of resources. Okay, so the next one is to integrate social care with the NHS. So Jeremy would like to, I guess, create some kind of super department which does welfare benefits as well as provide for the citizens a certain level of healthcare. Now, I guess you could say that it sounds really great in terms of providing healthcare service as a human right to everybody at the point of I can't remember what it says, but at the point of request or whatever, they go straight to the NHS and they have to wait in a queue forevermore, and then they get some kind of service. But some kind of integration of the social care and the NHS. I'm not sure exactly where he's coming from. Maybe he's trying to do some cost saves, but I probably very much doubt it. He's probably trying to create a larger super state structure of social care. And really, to create this large superstate structure of social care, you need to tax more from the people and reallocate it into this system. And you are really diverting the wealth away from the wealth generators, and you are putting it back into the pockets of the people that were not great wealth generators. And you are really staving off the the entrepreneurship, and you are really staving off the ability for people to make their own choices, being liberal-minded people, and to make choices, to make even mistakes. If you do not allow people to make mistakes, sometimes you can ask the question, how can you ever make people ever learn? People really do make all the best decisions because they've made plenty of mistakes and failures in the past, so that they have the ideas and the realms to actually make these decisions. And unfortunately, it is a truth in life that some people's lives are a warning shot to other people to say, you shouldn't do this, make these mistakes, or this is the way that you're going to end up. And now, obviously, this happens in drug addiction and things like that. But it is important, and really it does, these kind of lessons that you see from other people is a reason why you should try and stick together in your social networks and try and be a good community and unit together, so that if any problems happen to you, that you can be looked after, and the charity of your close-knit unit can look after back over you. There's an old classic saying of charity begins at home. It's not this big, gigantic tax removal system which redistributes any of the wealth generation that you've created, which possibly could be used to rebuild and expand your business ideas to something even better than what it originally was. And redistribute to a load of people that do not have any wealth and have made really poor decisions and like spending all their money on gambling instead of really producing something of great value, and basically squander and remove that wealth and use it to ill means. Whereas the people that were wealthy, that really had invented something that was really good to build on, has been taken away, and really their means to capacity to build any further has been removed, and you can see how this has a real damaging effect on the economy. So, we're going to education. So, Jeremy would like to have a new education service providing universal childcare, abolishing student fees, restoring grants, and funding adult skills. What a fantastic idea. Now, the problem we have is, who's going to pay for this? And the problem is the people that are going to pay for this is the taxpayer. And where we have this new situation, where we have this new national education service, we are taking away wealth, and obviously this is going to be a repeating thing from me. We are taking away wealth from people which... Look, some people in this world really don't require an education service. People can learn things as they go along. I went through the state school education system, and came away with probably knowing how to manage my way in a prison sort of concentration camp sort of scenario, where people would be fairly violent, and I know how to avoid violence and keep my head down and keep myself out of trouble. So that's really the education service that I learned from the British government. And if you really want to just create this bigger national education service, which has this singular view of how to educate people, which is the curriculum, it's just going to sort of isolate and shut down people's minds even further. Are you going to teach kids Karl Marx now, so people are more inclined to think the ways of the labour union movement? Or are you going to give people freedom and give people choice to make their own decisions? Now, if you have taken away people's choice and you create this massive education service, now you've taken people's wealth, money away via taxes, and funneled it into a system of education which people have got no choice of in themselves, and they cannot allocate their own wealth in towards. So money has now been taken away from the people and now been put into this giant education system. Also, if you provide universal childcare, then what are the hidden costs of the universal childcare? So now you are stating that two parents need to go to work, and nobody should be really the children shouldn't really be looked after by any of the parents. So you are having children from a very early age being looked after by the state or by a system of people not really related to themselves. So it is sort of this Aldous Huxley sort of scenario where people are just being born into giant vets and being controlled and ruled by the state, and really people are not given their own choices. Imagine if people were given upfront the fees of how much the education service would cost, and they were given that lump sum and said, with this money, now you can put it forward to your own educational choices. Imagine how well the choices would be made. Maybe they would rather not spend it on education. They know that they can probably acquire a lot of the information from the internet now anyway, and they would like to start their own business. So you are trying to really funnel away decision-making, choices made by people, and put it into a centrally run government, which can decide on a curriculum that probably will not understand what the future trends of tomorrow will be, and will probably try and educate people on things which are a little bit out of touch, and maybe even probably quite damaging, like Karl Marx. So and this obviously applies all the way down the system, even by abolishing student fees. So really, you really get what you pay for in life, and everything comes for a cost. And really, like the problem is that it sounds so beautiful, so wonderful that students are educating themselves for free. But what about the students that never educate themselves? What about these kind of people? They're going out into this world, and they're not costing the government anything, but they have to work from the ground up. They have to get certain skills. I know that he's saying as well that there's grants and funding for adult skills as well now. So he's trying to sort of educate, and he's trying to funnel in wealth generation by a centrally planned system. And who knows what these grants and funding skills are going to be like, and are they going to be really that valuable to people in itself? Now, if you're creating funding for adult skills, then you're obviously taking money away from the taxpayer, from businesses itself that could probably do entrepreneurship programs and things like that, and you're creating funding for skills. You're taking people out of the business world, and you're creating these new trainers for these skills, so where they could be working towards the productivity of the nation. And it really is just sort of bleeding dry the actual nation state, and it isn't really fostering people's making their own choices for their own education. The way that I have become more learned over time is really me just making my own choices, and me focusing upon my own curiosity. It really hasn't been anything to do with what somebody has told me what to think. It's really been the way that I've learned certain things of how to think, and then I've been pursuing my own little plot, my own course from that point. So, yeah, just remember that. And obviously, times have changed now. Information is freely and widely available. It's not the way it used to be, where things were confined to fair few people in certain areas now. Information is widely available to everybody now, and you can become really well educated in any sphere by just practicing from the internet and then reapplying it in today's age. So it is a very short-sighted view to really just inject a load of money into fairly expensive buildings and properties and teachers, by the use of force, reallocating money which is removed from the free market and put into the production and the wealth generating side of the country, and then being put into this education system, which really is, it all seems particularly unnecessary. Okay, so another thing, which is obviously for workers' rights, is scrapping 0-hour contracts and a national living wage for all, regardless of age. This old chestnut. So it sounds really great on the outside. It sounds, oh yeah, we have rights, we have these beautiful things. Now, the reason why there is 0-hour contracts is because it enables less risk for the business owner. So if you was a business owner, you would be more than happy if you're not sure about how the circumstances of the economy is going and how things are going, and you may need to make some staff shortages, and so you may need to make some cuts in the future. Zero-hour contracts are fantastic. You rather than employing one person with like this full national waged set thing, which is restricted and it has to be fully employed. Now you can employ at least 3 or 4 employees, dependent on the scenario that you're in, on a zero contract. So you can afford to employ more people while the times are good and there's a big request for your business. And if the business is starting to go really into a downspin, you can remove all of these zero contract people, and you can keep your business alive for the future. So, and then maybe in the future again, you can employ these zero-hour contractors. Now, if you had to only employ these fully paid permanent staff, then really you do not have any way to calibrate your business to work with the hard times as well as the good times. And these businesses are the wealth generators of the nation. And like sometimes businesses have good runs, they really require more staff during seasonal times, and then sometimes they just do not require them. So it is an efficient way a method for business owners to actually employ staff. And it just basically destroys businesses. If you had these permanent staff and the costs start to creep up to be too much, that business goes under. That business never starts up again, and that person might have to go on benefits. Who knows? Everybody might need to go on benefits again. So it's an incredible loss to have to be used by the use of force to have permanent staff. And a national wage for all prevents businesses from employing people. It actually increases unemployment. It is initially it looks so beautiful. It looks a great idea, but as soon as you put it into force, if you look from the perspective of the business owners, of the wealth generators, they can afford to employ less people because of this national standard of living wage. And it's not really their fault that they have to employ people at low wages. It's just the state of the economy, which really isn't a matter of them. They're trying to improve the state of the economy. So you can't really complain about them trying to employ people at low wages. It is a voluntary decision between the worker and the employer to get to work together. Now, if the employer is paying too little, that worker has the choice to not work at all. So there hasn't been really any exploitism that's occurred. That work can just go to another person. And if you totally scrap all of the laws that are put in place to give workers rights and minimum wages and all that kind of stuff, you would definitely have a lot more of a liquid market in terms of employment, and people would be always looking. And people, like, if you completely deregulated the terms of the market of employment, you could just walk from store to store saying, "Do you need any work?" And people say, "Yeah, I need some work. You can come tomorrow." And you can start all of these things like trading for skills and apprenticeships and things like that. If you lowered the regulation of the work market, not increase the regulation, which inevitably does impede the wealth generators, as it always does. People's QE. This is another idea, I guess. Rather than providing liquidity or low credit to the banking sector, so very cheap credit to the banking sector, now it would potentially give money. I guess it's not really going to the people, but it's going to be spent on government infrastructure programs. So this is sort of the Chinese method. So we could start building bigger roads. We could start building big factories. Who knows what we could start building with all this QE funding. Now, the problem, as I mentioned before, is that you're removing money. So if you're increasing the money supply, you are really you're devaluing money that is in the people's pockets, So you're really stealing from the people by devaluing what the wealth is in their pockets, and then you are spending that devalued money from the money that you devalued, and you've increased the money supply on infrastructure programs, which could be a misallocation of resources. And as I've mentioned before, who knows? Really, the government is probably not the best predictor of what the future trends and markets predictions are of the future. It's probably the top CEOs and the Steve Jobs in this world who understand what the market is going to move towards in the future, and even they make big mistakes at the best times anyway. So to let alone a populist politician to make the correct decisions is really a little bit out of key there. Another thing is he's mentioned that there's problems of deindustrialisation. Obviously, that was the recalibration of the UK from being a industrial industry into a service sector industry. Now, obviously, if he read a little bit about Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations, he would understand that there has been obviously a value exchange that has occurred. We've realised that to provide the service, to provide to the customer, it's been cheaper to outsource it to a foreign land. I know that they've been manipulating currencies and everything else, but let's say, for example, that they have done this, then people are now freed up to retrain and start a new market. Now, obviously, if you could say that in the past, whether you had the slave trade, all the slave workers were working on the farms, and now machineries came in. This is obviously automation, but the automation has come in, and now we have a agricultural sector which is only using like 1% of the national population, and the rest of the population are working towards making other more efficient, useful products. So industrialization, obviously the UK was the part of the Industrial Revolution, and it changed, and really the cost of the labour was getting abhorrently too expensive. But now it's sort of an opportunity for these people to reskill, retrain into new services, new high-tech industries, which are flourishing in today. And if you look at like the Silicon Valleys, there is new markets, new territories. There's always new inventions which can be created, which is out there, and even you could say high-tech factories can be created now. But if you try to put in certain tariffs and you start saying that there is a higher price for Chinese imports and things like that, you are basically trying to funnel in certain markets, you're distorting markets, so you're creating a manufacturing industry back in the UK to produce, say, whatever, plastic goods. And really it's an inefficient market, and that market where they're creating plastic goods in the UK now, who knows what kind of business could have been created in itself. So that could really have been a highly functioning technological sort of high-tech car manufacturing company, and now it's just making some crappy little plastic goods. So if you try to bring back and you put in and install protectionism, it really doesn't improve the wealth of the nation. It just drags on it, and it really just misallocates wealth and knowledge and the power of people's minds into really redundant industries, and doesn't really push us on the forefront of improving into new industries. Now, obviously, you could say that the credit expansion system has put a lot of people in working industries and great minds into the banking sectors and the banking industries. Yeah, it has been a problem with corporatism and credit expansion. Things probably do need to be addressed in that sense, but as time progresses and there is the recalibration of the markets into things that people require, which do improve the efficiency of people, we'll see probably less so of a market into the banking sectors and the service industries, and back into high-tech industries and maybe virtual industries as well. So you can see that I think in the UK there is like a new generation of like gaming and internet-based businesses and Bitcoin and things like that. So really, markets should be moving towards new industries. Next is, so mentions things from Jeremy. He says there was no real big alternative to the Tories, and that is probably true. there wasn't really any big alternative to the Tories. They were much of the same, and I've mentioned that before in terms of the Blairites just really being very conservative in the first place. Yeah, he's done a lot of mentioning about protectionism and not protecting it enough from the Chinese. Protectionism isn't really the correct methodology, as I've explained before, of how you generate wealth for the people. He has highlighted that there has been an incredible growth of the financial service industry, which I would say to a certain extent is true. There is obviously financial services do provide value to people. It is the way that resources are allocated from one person to the other. Really, you want to have the lowest margin as possible, where you transfer wealth from one person to another, and you allocate the correct amount of. It's basically you're providing value to one side to the other. A business owner, is more efficient at creating a tool than the other. So you have to generate wealth you have to find wealth and capital to allocate to that person. If you have a gigantic financial industry which is created off the back of that, they're obviously increasing their margin and taking a lot of wealth from the allocation of resources. So it is in essence, it is probably a bit of a bad thing to have a massive banking industry. And there is some truth behind it, and maybe probably the answer is, well, the riskier banks should have been allowed to fail. But I'm not sure exactly how he's going to go about probably dealing with the financial industry. If he creates his national bank, then that creates problems in itself as well. He also has mentioned I think he's an MP for Islington, which is in London, but he has mentioned about recalibrating the ruling force of government to other northern sources. So all the departments like the MOD, the Ministry of Defence, and things like that to be replaced into the north. Fantastic idea to generate more jobs in different places which have been quite deprived. However, there's a lot of questions as to do you have the correct people that can do those jobs in those areas? Do you have what are the costs? Is this going to cost more to the public purse, to the taxpayers, to reallocate? Is it going to be cheaper with the labour? You never know. So it really does need to be a decision based upon cost and efficiency more so than just this national pride thing. And also he's mentioned about relocating the parliament to different locations or revolving locations, so there's a little bit more proportional representation, which does sound a little bit better, but what are the costs involved of that? And then he does mention about breaking down the status quo, and I guess this goes down to the corporatocracy, which I guess highlighting a light on corporations and corporate greed is a good thing. It is one of the manipulations of the state and the power which occurs, but the problem is the force in itself. And finally, and probably the most worrying thing is that there was one interview where he mentioned, Jeremy, that he wanted to increase the state beyond 50% taxation and go way beyond that. And he sees that there is no issues with doing that. And as I've mentioned before, as you increase the size of the state, you are really reducing the wealth generators. The wealth generators are becoming less so and less so until you're really the snake is eating off its own tail, and you have nothing left. There is really the welfare state is only generated by the wealth generators, and really, if you're going to calibrate your country, you do need to just have a little bit of the margin of welfare, and letting the free market wealth generators flourish at the same time. If you just really downtread and use the state to take away the wealth from the people that have got good business acumen and reallocate it to the poor, that is a dangerous thing. And if it gets too far, if it goes beyond 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, it gets worse and worse and worse, and there is literally no more people to tax. And then you do have incredible issues of starvation and other issues as well. I know this sounds like an incredibly bleak picture, especially for a Western country like the UK, but it is a problem. And if you do have this growing voting base of welfare people, lots of immigrants coming into the country, maybe they're not very skilled to work in the workforce, so they do require benefits. That's all these are all voting blocks for the labour union movement. The labour union workers obviously are going to request for more force for them against the corporatocracies. But it is a dangerous thing, and it does end up in some certain type of death spiral where you bite off the breadwinners until they immigrate themselves. They remove themselves from the country. They don't want to be part of this system any further. Until you have no free market whatsoever, and you do have incredible issues to manage down the line. So, yeah, with all these things, with socialism and with the left wing, as always, and I will always mention this thing, it's always about the hidden costs. The things that they put out are very emotionally heartwarming ideas about feeding the poor and providing wealth to people that really haven't got a good chance in life. But really, there is hidden costs. You've got to think about the taxman who is taking away that wealth from those people, and that wealth is no longer spent back into the market. So people can't really work out what is the correct allocation of resources and what business industries and what are the best efficiencies and cost savers for the people. People are the best decision makers in terms of how they spend their money and what they want in their lives. The vote is really in the money that we spend, not really the vote that we go down to a ballot box every 4 years. So we vote with our money how we choose to live our lives, and as we have less and less money and we have more and more state control, we are not making our own choices in our life, and it's really coming down to a state-run system which is telling us how to think, how to run our tasks, what we should be doing for the state, and really being a replacement of like that religious sort of central force of telling you what to do. So it is a very dangerous thing. Be very wary of Obi-Wan Kenobi impersonators. Friendly looking appearances can be deceiving. Always the best warning is to look at the hidden costs. Whenever somebody puts forward this great idea to reallocate resources, who is losing out and what are the implications of that loss? And it really does improve the way in which we can work out what are the injustices which are occurring in this world. So, yeah, thank you very much for your time. It gives you a little bit of thought when the next election happens in probably 2020 almost, I would say. So, yeah, thank you very much for your time as always. And, yeah, keep on firing the torch of liberty. I will be back again for more. Thank you very much for your time, and goodbye.